My guest this week on the What's Up Solar podcast is Derek, the Solar Boi Mast. Derek started in the solar industry in 2014 with 6 years of electrical work already under his belt. After a few years of installing systems, he found his true love in troubleshooting and maintaining aging systems, from the smallest residential PV to greater than 5 megawatt utility systems. He has a master's or equivalent electrical license in 6 states and has passed the NABCEP for PV installation professional, PV commissioning and maintenance specialist, and PV system inspector. The Solar Boi emerged on TikTok in 2022 as Derek searched for ways to share any knowledge he can with the consistently growing solar workforce or potential solar customers that don't feel they understand solar very well, or existing customers that are worried about their aging systems. Through entertaining and educational videos about electrical theory or rapid shutdown devices, Derek the Solar Boi has reached tens of thousands of people and doesn't plan to slow down anytime soon. Stay tuned on the What's Up Solar podcast for my interview with Derek the Solar Boi. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Guess what? Today is a wonderful day because the sun came out. It may be cloudy, but the sun came out. It's still a good day. So let me tell you what had happened. What had happened was I was like a fan of this dude on TikTok. And so I'm at the NABCEP conference and I'm standing next to this dude and I look over, and the only way I know is because of the color of his beard. At that moment, I had a Charlie Murphy situation. I saw my Rick James. It was Derek the Solar Boi.
Oh, such flattery. I will take it all.
I was like, you're, he was like, yeah, I know you.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But it keeps growing with you. My admiration keeps growing.
Oh,
And
I appreciate that.
I'm gonna tell you why, because I didn't even know you had a blog. I didn't. I just follow you. You know, I'm ADD, attention deficit. I'm just scrolling away. I don't pay attention to anything else. If I have to read it, it takes me to buckle down and like concentrate now because they programmed us. But you write some really good stuff, and
Oh, thank you.
I like the circular way you write things because you will reference things that you talked about earlier in your posts so people can have a good context. First, I gave the intro of who you are, what you are. What got you into electrical?
Um, so electrical, I got into right after high school. Actually, I was homeschooled. So I worked part-time my senior year of high school, because I could. And so that was just general electrical. I was working like commercial, residential, kind of a smattering of everything. And I worked in electrical until 2014
Hmm.
was when I got the opportunity to go over to solar. And that's where I've been working ever since. Worked in installation for 3, 4 years, then moved over to service, which is what I've been working in ever since. Um, so yeah, but I mean, electrical was always, I was one of those kids that I had no idea what I wanted to do when I grew up. So I was
Yeah.
just kind of like, oh, I don't know, I'll figure something out. And then my dad, he did wastewater treatment. He like built wastewater treatment plants,
Yeah.
and the electrician that he worked for, or that worked for him in these projects, they were chatting, and he was like, "Ah, do you know anybody that needs help, or do you know anybody that needs work over the summer?" And he was like, "Yeah, my son would be probably into it," and I was very into it, so uh, that was my start into electrical.
There's I was thinking about this as I was reading your blog. Um, it came up. I was like, all right, who would I interview? Who's in the space? And I realized that you're in a very succinct space, which is typically the commercial applications of troubleshooting and repair. And I was like, who's on the residential side? And it's Solar Goat. I was like,
Yeah.
oh,
Hmm.
so it's solar go. So those are two good references, and I never made that correlation because I just see it as solar.
Hmm.
But they're two very different spaces. But one is kind of doing this thing because of money and financing and bills, and commercial seems to be growing.
Yeah, and I don't have a whole lot of visibility into the money side of things. I'm just not interested in that
I
unless I have
understand.
to be. So, but yeah, I mean, residential, I know it has a lot of interesting nuances to it when it comes to finances and trying to sell systems, and
Oh yeah.
that's where the solar bros get the most light in in the conversation.
But you know what? Here's where I'm working. So if you're not part of um, if you're just complaining about it, then you're part of the problem. So
Yeah.
a couple of months ago, I started working on solar energy for consumers, which is because, which is to educate the consumer on the process of getting solar,
Hmm.
because that's where most of the problems start on the residential side. Like these
Yeah.
people go, they say, the salesman said, no, we're in America. This is legal land. If you sign something, that's what's binding. So a lot of people just don't know. The commercial side is totally different. People are looking at projects from a different aspect. But what gives us the black eye in this industry is how the public perceives it. And if they have bad
Hmm.
experiences, that's going to cause a problem. So I that's how I'm attacking it. But I want to segue because you follow a passion that I like to troubleshoot things. I'd like to know everything I can.
Hmm.
I want to get down because I used to work in spectrometers. I worked in tier three automotive, bench repair. That is like a zen thing. When you
Hmm.
get down and your mind is like turning into the beautiful mind, and you're thinking, how did you fall into this category of like, I want to troubleshoot?
So this is very much like this gets into the philosophy of how our brains work, right? Like
Yeah.
I have from a young age I was diagnosed with ADHD. That has been a large part of my identity for, my entire adult life. But I've also realized over the last few years that while not officially diagnosed as such, I definitely am also autistic
Really?
because I have, yeah, so I've got this wonderful ADHD autism combo. And the more that I think about this, the more that I realize that there are a lot of those brains exactly in this field because it it triggers both sides. It complements both sides of the brain, right? ADHD is always looking for new stimulation, new
Yeah.
things to look at, new things to do.
Yeah.
Um, and the autistic side of one's brain really likes to focus in, really likes to dive in on the details, make sure everything's exactly right, which is exactly it's the set of skills that you need in someone that's doing service,
I just
right?
had an epiphany.
Yeah. When I have this conversation with people, people start making start looking back on their lives and like, wait a minute. Um, so yeah, that's just how I've always been interested in, even back when I was doing general electrical, right? Is doing the fixing things, like figuring out, tracing down the wires in the walls to try to find out where the problem is. It's always been fun. Um, I don't like to be rushed when I'm doing it. So there are some sides of the industry where that's
Yeah.
you're less able to do that than others. But um, when I'm able to really spend my time focusing in on a problem and fixing it, that's just my happy space.
You know,
I love it.
and here's the other side of that is a sense of accomplishment.
Yeah.
Like when you find the problem, you're like dun 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 dun. Dun.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's
Yeah,
a
and I
really nice
listen to a
feeling.
lot of like tech podcasts too, or like coding podcasts,
Yeah.
where people will talk about that feeling of like, oh, there's that sense of accomplishment. There's like there's the whole time leading up to it where you feel like, oh, I'll never figure this out. I can't figure it out. But your brain also won't let go of it until you figure it out. And then once you figure it out, that rush is just immense
Yeah.
and delightful, and there's nothing quite like it. And that's exactly the same for service and troubleshooting as well. There are, and people that get into service or are starting to go into service, or I'm like telling them, hey, you should try getting into service. They're like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to,
Figure it
like,
out.
I don't know how to troubleshoot X inverter. Like, yeah, I don't either. You go talk to tech support, you try some stuff, you have some basics under your belt. And if you have enough basics under your belt, you could figure out what you're doing.
I always say it starts with Ohm's law.
Hmm.
So, and I've gotten pushback from certain people, and they're like, why do we have to know this Ohm's law thing? I'm like, every problem I solve is fundamentally rooted in that.
Hmm.
They're like, what do you mean? It's in solar, do you have voltage? Do you have current?
Hmm.
Is there a resistance? They're like, oh, never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
It's like, because I was working for this company and I was troubleshooting a lot of things. And they were like, how are you solving all these problems? I'm like, Ohm's law.
Yep.
Simple.
Yep. Yeah, if you got a breaker tripping, like what's causing that much resistance in the breaker or that much heat in the breaker, yeah, you can reduce it down to Ohm's law for basically everything.
I,
Uh,
you wrote a cool article about security in inverters based on
yeah.
Chinese manufacturers. I was reading the article and it summarized to a good point. Some of it is kind of a logical thing that you'll see, which is um, if you have a cellular modem in anything, you have to have a network that you are affiliated slash connected to. You have
Hmm.
to have a means of identifying. I never turn in my cell phones. Never. I keep them. As a matter of fact, the camera that you're looking at me on is a cell phone, an old
Nice.
cell phone that I retooled to be a webcam. They have so many applications you can use them for.
Uh-huh.
But this thing will tell me right away, you're not part of our network as soon as I turn it on. You don't have a plan. Even if you are a foreign entity, you need a network that you can connect to. This is my supposition for this. You need
Hmm.
some kind of network. I would be more prone to data push from Ethernet or Wi-Fi than I would cellular. What's your
Hmm.
take on it?
Yeah, so to give some context, there was an article by, was it Reuters, I think, um, where they were saying that there's a rumor that U.S. energy officials they're reassessing the risk posed by Chinese-made devices that we install in solar. There's a lot of them. That there are secret communication devices in these inverters that they've found. They're like, oh, we need to figure out what's going on here. There's some like cellular modems in some batteries that they found as well. And when reports come out like this, I'm always very skeptical of them because, well, first off, we don't have a direct source, right? We have
Yeah,
sources
that
to
that's what I saw
sources
too.
in the US government. So there's no public statement that anybody has to back up. This is rumors, and when rumors like this happen, they're very flashbangy. Like it gets everybody's attention because nobody likes the idea of secret communication, secret control from China. Like it's a beautiful story to put out there to make a point that we need to be concerned about something. Um, but if you have an inverter that's has a communication device in it, it needs to communicate to something. And how is it
Correct.
actually making that communication, right?
Right.
So you brought up cellular devices, they brought up cellular devices. Cellular devices still need to connect to a cellular network.
Correct.
And that is something that is measurable. I guess you could put like a time delay on the cellular device being activated to be like, oh, in 6 months, maybe after everything is commissioned, uh, then we'll turn it on and start secretly communicating data.
But
Uh,
if it's a foreign entity, so if I take an American cellular card, an American inverter, and I install it in Austria, where my wife is from, boom.
mhm.
What network am I going to? The
Yeah.
IME, the serial number, all that gets broadcast, and so
Mhm.
it could be easily rejected unless I have the Emmett Muckles network in Austria.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like you would need to have a cellular network to connect to, and you could, I guess, secretly buy a bunch of cellular contracts with a domestic cellular network, but there's a lot starts getting into like, how do you cover up such a conspiracy? That's not just having secret cellular devices in an inverter. Now that's involving a ton of people that have to support your secret control over the entire energy network of the United States, right? There's a lot of complexity to this being potentially real, aside from, oh, secret little communication devices. The most realistic explanation for something like this, if it's true, again, we are assuming that it's true, which we shouldn't necessarily give the government the benefit of the doubt on that right now. The If it's true, the most reasonable explanation is, oh, it was a feature that got canned and those devices just aren't hooked up, right? Like that happens. That
That
absolutely
happens a
happens in
lot,
electronics.
a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah, like they'll design the circuit board with all these features. Think of your BMW, think of your Tesla. You have all these features that are built in. Most of them you don't know about unless they say, "Would you like a subscription for this?"
Hmm.
And if they are not subscribed to or bought into, they're not turned on. So you're spot on with that. Um, does this tie into the D? How do you say it?
It's
DEYE?
Deye. I didn't know
Doya.
how to pronounce it properly until somebody at Solarc corrected me. It's Doya. So
But
Doya had this thing in November.
it's spelled DEYE, right?
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. But it's Chinese, so it's, of course it's pronounced differently, which I just didn't know
I've
how
been
to pronounce
killing
it.
that for years.
So yeah, Doya had this thing back in November where they shut down a bunch of their inverters, their branded inverters that were sold on the black market or gray market into a bunch of territories that they weren't supposed to be sold into. Which is the overall overarching like piece of information as to why they did this. But they shut down a bunch of them remotely. And that was just through whatever communication device, whatever communication path was set up on them.
Yeah,
There, of course, are Doya inverters that were not hooked up to any communication, any
and they were
Ethernet,
fine.
any cellular, and they were fine. They continued to produce just fine. Um, but it was that connection to Doya's servers that allowed Doya to shut the inverters down. So, yeah, it's possible. And that is the most likely scenario for something like this in the United States in terms of cybersecurity is SolarEdge gets hacked and a bunch
Oh,
of their inverters gets shut down, or SMA or any large inverter manufacturer, right? Like
hmm.
if you have your inverter set up to connect to the World Wide Web, there's always going to be that potential of whatever portal it's connected to gets hacked and your inverter gets shut down. And now for a residential system, that's not a huge deal just for one person, right? It's more a concern at the grid level if you have
Right.
suddenly a lot of production that gets shut down all at once.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
that would, I could, if it's depending on that and they are shut down, those switches and grid just goes, that, oh,
yeah, you
good.
know, like it's a shock to the system like that. That's not great. It's not great.
No,
Which is the concern, right? We aren't concerned about inverters. Not We're not really concerned about data transfer. I think based on this article, we're concerned about
implications.
uh, yeah, grid stability. And on the utility level, this is basically not a concern because you're going to be a lot more thoughtful about how your inverters are connected to the wider internet. And most of the time, they just are not connected to the wider internet. They're, you know, using Modbus, or they have an isolated network that gets connected to the main communication device that is, made by Also Energy or somebody like that.
Yeah.
Which Also Energy does not have the ability to shut down inverters. I guess they could maybe build that into their stuff, but that's just not something that they
No,
have
I mean,
available.
I, and when it comes to residential, that's kind of a feature that's built in because of PPAs and leases. If you stop
Mhm.
paying, click,
Right.
turn that system off.
Yeah, that's exactly why that function is in there, is
Yeah.
for PPAs and leases. It is also handy for like when you are installing a residential system and you want to flip the switch, but you don't have approval from the power company and the site is 2 hours away.
Mhm.
um, you can have it be, by software shut down until you get approval from the power company, and then you can turn it on remotely. That's also really nice.
Or you get a
um,
customer who wants to turn it on anyway.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Seen that.
Yep. I mean, that's on them at that point. That's not super worried about that at that point. Um,
No,
so yeah,
that,
really the go ahead. Sorry.
no, that's really interesting because they didn't cite any people. They didn't cite where this was coming from. And
Yeah.
this is one of the things that you have to watch out for in this society is when somebody makes a bold claim, but they have nothing to substantiate it. You're like, because it really makes people skittish about stuff. Uh,
Hmm.
I don't want that inverter because they could sell my stuff. Now, there's another implication with this is your personal information. If someone is monitoring, can monitor it from afar, your personal information. Because I realize this with residential battery, because now if you have information that you can see into their portal, for instance, if you're doing O&M and you want to make sure that it's functioning or performance guarantee, you have privy to when they're home, when they get up, when they go to sleep, when they charge their car. There's a lot of information that you can ascertain just by watching someone's consumption or non-consumption of their energy. Uh, that's one of the things that kind of just slightly piqued my brain when you were talking about, hey, they can see this information from particularly a battery uh,
Hmm.
that will what would be the implications of that? And I don't even want to get into it because my mind went dark.
Well, so this is where you want to start reading privacy policies for the inverters and batteries and load management systems that you install, like the span panels, Lumen, and any inverter brand. You want to check their privacy policies to see what what data they collect and for what purpose, and what they are saying that they're allowed to do with that data. Now, would it be great to have some sort of data privacy legislation in the US to manage some of this like that Europe does? It would be awesome to have that, but we are just not clearly interested in that legislatively in the US. Um, but that would be ultimately the way to solve this. But you can find out a lot about a company by reading their privacy policy. I think the last time that I read Spans, they explicitly allowed for being able to sell your information to other companies if they wanted to, not just for, you know,
Oh, and you have no control if they sell your information to another company, whether that be whatever that is. You have no
mhm.
control over it after that, right?
Right. And again, does that matter a ton from a very personal level? Not a ton. I mean, realistically, on a personal level, unless somebody at the company has it out for you, like, which is not likely, that's not a big concern. But it is a concern in aggregate that you have companies starting to profit off of, or potentially there's nobody that is explicitly profiting off of selling your user data. I don't mean to imply that. There's nobody that I know of that's actually doing that yet. But you do want to check those privacy policies if it's something that you care about to not have your data be sold off because you are buying a product, right? Like you are paying money for this. It's one thing for it to be Facebook or YouTube or some other site that you get value for free and they are
Yeah.
using advertising and your data in order to pay for that value. But when you're buying a product, you want to make sure that you still have ownership of your data because it's otherwise that feels skeezy to me.
Yeah, especially when it's dealing with typically your lifestyle. Because, like I was saying before, you can
Yeah.
ascertain a lot about an individual or a small group of people, such as a family, from this information. Like, and I know this because I've had to troubleshoot and I've had to look at weeks of data of someone's consumption, their PV, their battery, and I could pretty much tell their lifestyle. I could tell when they were home. I could tell
Hmm.
I can tell when somebody came home in the middle of the day and did some things. I can tell if they had an electric car or if they didn't, or if they grew weed in the basement. I could tell. You
Hmm.
know, it's just things that are people don't think about. They just think, hey, I can get a battery. Um, and we're talking mostly residential. When it comes to commercial, and I want to segue into this, have you gotten into troubleshooting the commercial batteries?
I have not yet. That's so I'm in Pennsylvania. Don't be creepy. But the Pennsylvania market doesn't have a lot of incentive for batteries yet. Not like there would be in California, where you got an M3.
Yeah.
Um, you kind of have to have batteries to make things make sense over there now. So batteries over in Pennsylvania are more of a novelty in the residential side, and
Mm.
certainly on the commercial side, it's still a novelty. We are, I think, looking at a couple of projects where we might be able to put in batteries, but that's a couple of years out, and we'll
I,
see. A lot
I
can
had
happen in a couple of years.
I had a couple of months ago. I think it ended a couple of months ago. I just kind of had to wash my hands of it. I had a huge battery. Now this battery was installed in the mid-teens. It was bought in the mid-teens, but it wasn't installed until a couple of years later. What's the problem with that? Warranty.
Mm-hmm.
So a problem happened. They're like, that's out of warranty. They're like, what?
Oh, that
What do you mean? We
sucks.
just put this thing in. Yeah, but you bought, and it's a whole different level of thing because now you're looking at megawatt or like 500 kilowatt hours of a battery management system, timing, things of that nature, and they're huge. But when I was at RE Plus, I saw a lot of commercial batteries coming onto the fray, and so get yourself ready for it. Uh,
Yeah,
what's your next thing? What's the, what's
my
the
next
thing?
thing.
What's the thing that's outside of your blog? You post a great content because you make me think. One that I think of the most is when you had these fuses. You had a shorted panel, shorted
Oh
module,
yeah.
and you're like, yeah, I turned the system off. I'm all good. And you reminded me of something that kind of happened to me where you said you went to flip the fuse holder out and it just went and you don't know you have to check the current
Hmm.
coming into those fuses. Just because the system's off does not mean that there's not a complete circuit somewhere. That is
Hmm.
uber important. And I'm adding that, making sure I drill down on that on my O&M talk.
Hmm. No, and everybody's gonna have one of those, right? Unless they somehow get it hammered in enough where they're like, "Oh, we're, all right, I will never open a fuse without checking the current on it first." But people get lazy and people get apathetic, and when that happens, you will find yourself in a place where you've got fuses zapping on you, and that's no fun. It's no good
Yeah.
for anybody.
I had, Fronius, and you like Fronius, I can tell.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've Yeah, yep.
When I
I
used
do
to,
like their current residential inverters a lot.
yeah, when I was working, they had just come out with the Simos, the first generation Simos,
Yeah.
on a roof, like a Target or something like that. And one inverter is just having problems, so turn it off. They had the clamshell design, so you could install those from here down to flat. So these are flat on the roof, and we turn everything off. We turn DC disconnect off on the inverter as well. I go to open it up and I clamshell it in this beautiful blue arc. Just and what I had to do is as soon as I saw it, I basically turned into the Hulk and said
Just
and
rip that
ripped it.
thing off as
I
fast as
ripped the
possible.
clamshell off like and everybody was looking at me like, we didn't know you were that strong. I was like, you didn't know I was that scared. But that arc
Oh yeah.
continued for like 12 to 15 inches as I pull this thing off. And then it broke the circuit. But everything was turned off. And from there, it was just like, ugh. So you never know. You really need to check the energy that's going through that fuse. Even though stuff is turned off, you could have a short somewhere in between there. You could have shorted module. I just thought that just made me go when I saw you actually show that.
Yeah, I'm so curious as to what happened to make that happen in that situation. Like, because usually if you're able to take that thing off, you have the DC disconnect off, you have you shouldn't have any power going through. I'm just so curious. The inverter must have been fried or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I think what had happened was it had an arc, and
Okay.
I was talking with um, a customer yesterday. He was like, "Emmett, my inverter arced out." I'm like, "What's your current?" He's like, "I'm right at the threshold." He's like, "But this thing like did like the guy from the Fantastic Four, it just flamed up."
Crazy.
And I said, "What probably happened was you had some problems uh, with torque connection. It was doing
Maybe.
some micro arcing. This is just my theory. It was doing some micro arcing. When it was doing the micro arcing, it's leaving that carbon trail. That carbon trail is resistance and can be conductive, especially when you're dealing with uh 430 volts at 51 amps.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
He was like, "Oh, that makes sense." I was like, "I've seen it, and I've seen it in various things, in various aspects of my career in electrical. When you have an arc, it leaves a residue and it creates a path of current. You wouldn't believe it, but it does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's wild.
It's bizarre. It's bizarre. Um, so you got your blog.
Yes. So, I mean, the thing that kind of started me was doing TikTok again. But I am focused more on YouTube these days. So, I am uh,
because of
Derek
the
Solar
long
Boy over
because of
on,
the because
huh?
it gives you a longer format.
Well, so there's this thing that the government likes to keep doing to TikTok, and they keep trying to ban it. And currently, while we can still use TikTok, it's not exactly legal that it continues to operate based on the legislation that was passed
It's
against
not the
TikTok.
same either, though. Either it's not.
Yeah.
When they shut that down, they they did a timeline shift on that.
Yeah, I don't know. Everything anyway, TikTok is more or less sort of dead to me in terms of focusing on it for content creation. And you know what? I say that and then I went off on a tear this last couple of days about the legislation that passed the House. I've been posting a ton over there and most of it doesn't make it to the other platforms because they don't do like vertical short form
Yeah.
video that's longer than 3 minutes. So, but anyway, I do. YouTube is what I'm focused on for posting content. I'm trying to get all my old TikToks over there, re-edited and uploaded there. But the thing I'm focused on the most right now is the 3741 reference.
Yes, I saw that.
So if you go to ul3741.com, and my hat says "Ask me about ul3741." This is something I'm passionate about because it helps us get away from using module level rapid shutdown.
Wait a minute. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I see it now. Why no Solar Edge or in phase?
Oh yeah. So I've been posting a couple of informational articles over there as well. But I just did a redesign on the site itself. But the point of the site is to be able to list racking systems with all of the inverters and like string level shutdown devices that they are compatible with in their listing. So in the National Electrical Code, you have two options for compliance within the array, like internal array shutdown, and which was passed in 2017.
So that's the
The
80
first
volt
option,
between
huh?
two modules, right?
Yeah, so it's 80 volts between any 2 points.
Points.
And that is where we get pretty much everybody using Solar Edge or Enphase or AP Smart Rapid Shutdown, that kind of stuff. But at the maximum, you're gonna be doing like two modules per device, which, on a commercial roof mount, if you've got 500 panels up there, that's 250 extra electronic devices that may go bad over the next 10 years. And that's a huge service nightmare, quite honestly. Because if you're
Yeah.
doing a truck roll for one or two devices each time, like that's way more money than you should be shelling out for a system like that. So my goal is to get as many of those devices off the roof as possible. And 3741, UL 3741 lets us do that by the standard gives you a lot of data points to hit in terms of like how strong the panel is, what the wiring management is like, and crafts you a certain amount of danger for the firefighters based on what design things that you are taking into account. So most of the time when a racking company, for the most part, certifies their system for UL 3741, they are taking into account inverters and doing all this testing to say, yeah, you can keep up to 1,000 volts within the array boundary. And as long as you still comply with array level shutdown, from like, what is that? Like 20 volts or less from the roof to the ground or something. I don't remember exactly, but as long as you still comply with array level
I think it's
shutdown,
30
you
volts.
can use these parts and you're good to go, which eliminates, for the most part, module level rapid shutdown, which is awesome. Again, the fewer parts on the roof in the heat, the better. But the problem with that is that every racking company, for at least historically up till recently, has listed specific inverters for their 3741 listing. And it's really hard to figure out, okay, what inverter can I use with which racking system, right? And this was something that I wanted to catalog, and that is what the 3741 reference is. So if you go to ul3741.com, you can click through and see all the manufacturers that have UL 3741 listings and what all devices or racking systems they are compatible with. And I keep up to that. I check the listings probably every week or so and try to keep that up to date as much as possible.
So where do you go to the manufacturers? You use CEC lists? How do you or, do you cross reference these with the UL? How,
So there are a couple of certification bodies. There's Intertech, there's UL, there's CSA. And while the standard is made by UL doesn't need to be the one to certify it to that standard. You
right.
can, you know, so Intertech is the one that has been the most proactive in these UL 3741 listings. Um, but CSA also has been coming into this with a slightly different strategy of just saying, hey, this racking system, you can use any inverter that's listed to 1741.
Mm.
and or any shutdown device. As long as you're still complying with array level shutdown, it's fine. You can use any inverter that's still under these other UL listings, which is great and will hopefully put that site out of business. But there is still a lot of
I don't think it
companies like
will.
Unirac, Iron Ridge, etc., that still have inverter specific or rapid shutdown specific listings. So,
Oh, I like how you put on here because I went to one from your blog and it took me somewhere else, but now I'm on the main page and I see how you have it structured as inverters, structures, and shutdowns
mhm.
with graphics, which is sweet because I think in pictures. Uh,
Yes.
what's the hope for this site?
The hope for this site is that it lets people design their systems more easily. Because there is not a ton of education out there yet about UL 3741. It is increasing, but it's slow. Because honestly, there is a lot more ease of design with systems that use optimizers or microinverters, but they're going to be more expensive. They're going to be more expensive on the front end. They're going to be more expensive on the back end with service. And the more I can reduce that threshold of difficulty with design and enable people to just be like, oh, this inverter, I could use this inverter with this racking. That's great. That's all I need to know. And then they can focus on the work that they're not used to with doing, string level calculations of like how many panels per string, how many strings per inverter, that kind of stuff. Um, so my goal is to make this information as accessible as possible so that people can make their systems more reliable and safer.
I have a question about that I want to broach.
Yeah.
I have to formulate it because I got this together. This is one of the only interviews where nobody's giving me questions. He just said, "Let's kick it." I mean, and I've done tons of podcast interviews, but there's very few people I can just get on and just start going. We do a lot of white labeling, so you'll think you're getting X brand of inverter when it's really not native to that. What was indicative of that is when I attended RE Plus over the last couple of years. Every other booth, the footprint is basically the same, be it a battery, be it a solar generator, be it an inverter. So it seems like there's a handful of manufacturers who are just whip it designing for everybody and they say go put your name, your colors on it. We may change the cabinet a little bit so you have a little bit of space, but it seems to be all the same. What's the point? We should know the original manufacturers, unless. But the only thing that can separate these, and I'll segue into that, is software. So,
Yeah.
like when you go buy a TV, they're all made by like three manufacturers physically, but they have different software or firmware that runs them. Is that you think that's the same for these inverters as well?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there is a lot of, I think Canadian Solar gets a lot of design from Solus. I think CPS manufactures the SunGrow inverters. Like there's a lot of white labeling. Um, I know, was it Sunrun has like SMA inverters and things like that. I don't
Well,
know.
they
Uh,
they used to do. I think they used to do, but now they're just buying
yeah,
Sunrun.
yeah. Well, and Selectria is a lot of CPS inverters. So yeah, there's a lot of white labeling. At that point, it comes down to price and who do you think has the better service team on the other side? Because again, like you could try to call up CPS to service a Selectria inverter, but they're not gonna do it because it's not under their brand. And is Selectria's technical support good enough for you? And is the price that you have less on that, worth it? I don't know. That again, that's mostly in the money conversation, right?
Yeah, and one of the things that gets me is we talk about making things in America. So someone said to me, "Hey, EG4 is made in America." That
No,
was
it's
my
no, it's not.
that was my exact. I actually have an EG4 inverter that runs in my garage. I have the 3K and a battery.
Hmm.
It runs my tools great. Um, but I was like, you might want to check your facts.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, you know how
No,
much it would cost to literally from it, to build
yeah.
an inverter here. That thing would be
No,
like
that's
10
an
grand.
entirely different policy discussion, which, one can have and one can offer incentives for that kind of stuff, which did happen with the IT, with the, um, was the, not the, is it Build Back Better? No, Inflation Reduction Act,
Yeah.
where there was a ton of money put into manufacturing. Um, I don't think it's going to be enough to produce a large percentage of inverters here, and certainly tariffs are not going to be the thing that allows and enables manufacturing here because you still need to import materials for a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
And uh yeah, we live in a globalist economy. We live it's an economy that's global. Trade is good. It helps us maintain relationships with other countries. Relying on each other isn't a bad thing. It that's, my opinion on that is pretty laissez-faire when it comes to, oh, this inverter is manufactured in China. It's like, I don't know that I super care. I mean, if you're worried about, again, cybersecurity stuff, we could have the cybersecurity conversation and have better data protection laws, but that would be something that only the government can do. So
There's something else that um kind of gets me going about it. What this really uncovers is that the dollar is not worth that much. And what I mean by that is I was thinking back when 2020, 2020, which is a long time ago. Yes, I'm that old. I was making $17 an hour. I was living a fat life.
mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
was good. $17 an hour is like $36,000 a year. I had a house in the burbs. I had two cars, and I was getting my credit card debt down. I was just I went from like I think it was 12 to $17. I got this job, and I basically cleared up all my debt in like a year and a half. And but now, if you make $17 an hour, you're barely paying rent.
You are broke at
You
$17 an hour.
That's crazy. So, and I was talking with my wife about this. I'm like, she was like, everything's so high. I'm like, I think it's a dollar thing. It's just not worth. I mean, like you got to make
Well, the
50 bucks
dollar,
an
the
hour.
US dollar is in demand, or it historically has been in demand globally. Like it is, the US dollar is a large part of what helps keep the global economy stable. But the wealth disparity, to your point, in this country is way wider now
Oh,
than it was before.
oh,
Uh, so the people that make the most money make way more money than the people that are in middle class or in poverty. Like this, the separation is way bigger now.
I see it, and I have a daughter who's in her 30s, and and this is why it's cool to have kids because they keep you relevant in the time. And she's laying it out for me. She's like, "Daddy, it's not easy." She was like, "Unless I have a very succinct thing that I'm working on, and that I have this inbuilt network that I can successfully navigate up, 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 up." She was like, if you're at a job and let's say you start out making a good wage, she was like, over time, inflation eats that wage away
Yeah.
because they give you 3%, but you've lost like 7%. I was like, ooh, and I didn't mean to go into economics discussion. It's just
I
I
mean,
just
solar is connected to everything, though, right? Like the
everything.
economy, our industry is pretty heavily reliant right now on what legislation does,
Yeah.
which I know there's a lot of people that are interested in getting us out of that at the expense of the industry. But the economy touches on everything, and solar is inherently political. It is because energy is necessary for an economy to thrive. It
Yeah.
is the base level building block that we use to create productivity in the modern era of the world. Plus, a big part of what we do is about trying to get our carbon emissions down. And so, if you're in the solar industry, but you don't like politics, I'm so sorry, but you are inherently, while working a solar job, you are making a political statement
Uh,
in whatever you're doing.
yeah.
It's you know, it's a
Well,
fun it makes for a spicy career. I'll tell you what.
oh, it makes for spicy table topics when you get generational people together. And and I'll say this: boomers, Xers, Ys, and Zs. And if you throw in a solar bomb in there or energy bomb, just clear the room. Just because it's about to get, it's like WWE after that.
Oh yeah.
Because they all have different opinions and they, I'll leave it at that. Anyway, we're getting long in the tooth here. Hey, I want to thank you so much for being on the What's Up Solar Podcast. I
It
know it
was
was
my pleasure.
difficult, and I am so happy that I got to have you here.
Well, it was my pleasure. It's great talking to you. I would love to do it again sometime.
Yes.
Always great catching up. So,
Well, you let me know when you have availability because the stars aligned this week, and we were able to do because we've been trying to do this for a couple of weeks.
hmm
So
I am classically just so difficult to schedule because I fill all of my free time with other things, and then I want to do another thing. I don't have free time.
yeah,
Uh,
I'm the
yeah.
same way. Right now, I'm cleaning out all the wood because I bought a CNC and a laser machine in 2020, and I collected all this knickknack wood. But now my wife said, clean out the basement and clean out the garage. So I have to build stuff, build and sell. So thank you for being on the show. And that's it for the What's Up Solar podcast, where the future is bright, knowledge is power. And if you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share the watt. Catch full video on YouTube of the episode for more solar truths, tips, and tech talk. Until next time, remember, follow Solar Boy. Stay charged, stay curious, and remember, the sun never sends a bill. Till next time, peace.